And
Kristen.
with Long Branch Shops, and we have a very special guest with us tonight, Logan Buchanan, correct?
Yeah.
With Brown Water Bourbon Company. And Logan is actually the youngest master blender. And correct me if I say anything incorrect, please, because I'm still new to the whole bourbon talk stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
But you're the world's youngest master blender.
Yeah, so there was a lady in Scotland who was 26 years old working for a distillery over there. And then I had her beat by a couple of years. So I'm 24 right now. So undercut that a little bit.
Yeah, I could tell you were young. I just didn't know exactly where we were hitting the mark at. I knew I was like mid-20s, like.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Yeah. That's exciting. So how did you come on the bourbon path to do this? Like, did you, because you are so young. So how did that even come about with you doing this?
Yeah, so kind of the first thing I can remember about bourbon was actually a trip to Buffalo Trace with my family. So I was probably 12 or 13 years old. It's before the big bourbon boom happened here in Kentucky. And my dad wanted to go visit for fall break. And so it was probably a 45-minute drive from our house. And so we went up for the day, went through the tour and did all that. And from there, it was just kind of interesting to me. I was always into science, so it was something kind of adjacent to that. And then I ended up going to UK. I went for ag and medical biotech. So I originally wanted to make like GMOs, making plants and, herbicides, that type of thing. And then I found out that I wasn't made to be in a lab all day long. I had to have some kind of person-to-person contact, be out doing something. And I ended up getting a research project with one of my professors, Dr. DeBolt, through the Beam Institute. So Jim Beam is actually endowed a school at the University of Kentucky that allows them to have a distillery there on campus.
Oh, nice.
So, and that's kind of cool too. That's something that I just learned. I did not even know that there was a Jim Beam school, and then I've seen that that's where you had gone, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, so it's one of a few in the world, and so they have a fully functioning distillery. You can take classes on how to run a still, how to make bourbon, how to make gin. All this other stuff. And so I kind of got in on the front end of that. So the year after I graduated is when they opened the distillery. But from there, I had a lot of classes. I kind of started off in the wine world. We had classes in college that were all about wine.
I was going to say, now you're in my foothold. I like some wine. Yeah. What exactly do you do as the master mixer?
Yeah, so
blender.
Yeah.
How do you?
I usually say blender, but
okay.
you could say whatever you want to. So kind of my main job is research and development. So a lot of the things that you're drinking that come from us, I kind of come up with the flavor profiles behind those, taste through barrels or mix things specifically to kind of make that. So like Thornbush or blackberry whiskey, I went out and had the bourbon for that, and then kind of had to come up with a formula on how to make that, how to kind of balance out the blackberry just right so it didn't taste like NyQuil, didn't taste like cough medicine.
And I will say 100% because I'm not a bourbon drinker, but the Thornbush is very, very good. I had some of that, and we actually now carry it over at Long Branch, and it is so good job. Very good.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And I think it's hard to find a bourbon that if you are like a female that's a wine drinker, or we were talking about vodkas or whatever, it's hard to find a bourbon that will actually be like something that's like delectable, that a female that's like that likes the like sweet taste. Because bourbon's really not a sweeter taste. Yeah. So it's kind of hard to find that happy little medium. So I think that's amazing that you have.
That's so crazy that you said that, because I was researching you online, and it was talking about some of the flavors in the Bond, and it was like caramels and vanillas and stuff. And,
I've seen that.
But when I tasted it, I was like, I did not taste any caramel or vanilla. So I guess it's just the palate. Your palate has to.
We all have different palates.
Yeah,
so
there's a whole way that you have to taste bourbon, right? You smell it and
taste it in your mouth.
Yeah.
You get to swirl it in the cup and make it. I used to do that with wine, when you'd like see how much it would stick to the glass.
Yeah, all the legs spinning it back and forth.
And seeing how that worked and stuff, because I thought that was so interesting.
I am not that fancy. I will just drink it, and if it tastes good, I like it, and if not, I ain't getting it.
When I worked at doing as a bartender or at the liquor store I worked at, that's, we got to taste everything that kind of came through, and they would show you how to like get the flavors and everything like that. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But to hear that, a blackberry that doesn't taste like NyQuil, because I know Jim Beam has one that to me was just horrible. Their peach. There's no peach. So it's hard to bring in those flavors because a bourbon is a bourbon. Some of them are a little bit smoother than others.
With the Thornbush.
Yeah.
Really
the art, the cover, like the labels of them are so beautiful. And I think that's going to draw people too, as well as females, because that was the first thing I noticed was how pretty your all's labels are.
Yeah, thank you.
But how do you go about finding out the blend that you want to like that is, even though it's good to you, do other people taste it? How do you all go about that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So for the blackberry, you brought up a really good point. Is it's very good as like an entry into bourbon. So not everybody likes like the 120 proof, really hot stuff that I do, really oaky stuff. So I wanted to kind of make something that people could put in a cocktail and that would taste good and kind of give them that flavor they're familiar with, but also kind of some bourbon on the back end too, to kind of get the best out of that flavor.
Yeah.
Now, at least for the bonds, a lot of what I did kind of the first time around in making those was kind of picking out what flavors I wanted. So I do like 4-barrel blends, and we pick from about 100 barrels in our warehouse. And really all I have to do is I have to kind of go through, taste those, and kind of evaluate those, see what type of taste I get out of them. And so for me, the biggest thing, and for you all maybe as well, if you're developing your palate, is trying something and then just trying to name that one thing that it tastes like. And so they actually have something that's called a flavor wheel. And so if you're able to pick out, well, oh, this is woody, it'll kind of direct you in the direction of, oh, this tastes like oak, or this tastes like sawdust, or this tastes like a number of other things. And so it's really just being able to kind of nail those flavors down. And so from there, I kind of pick out the barrels that I think are good. We make it into a blend. So the bonds are all 100 proof. So we have to proof everything down. And then kind of before I submit it to be bottled, I bring it to the rest of the team. I work with Ben and William, my two kind of co-founders in this. Bring it to them, make sure they're happy with it. And then if they are, then it's good to go. But yeah, I usually try to blend to other people's tastes, not necessarily my own. Like I told them, if I had went with the first blend I made, it would taste completely different and people probably wouldn't like it. But yeah, try to do kind of those big profiles that people are going after.
Well, and it's nice to have more than just like she was saying, she didn't taste anything that was in it. It's the different palettes. So it's nice to have a few different people taste it. Because I know we had done a wine tasting once, and I tasted all, like everything I was supposed to taste, and I didn't know, but I had named them all, and then somebody else tasted something completely different, but they still liked it. It just tasted completely different to them.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of neat that you all do that and make sure that it's not a what does Logan like, it's what is best for everybody.
Yeah.
And especially with the Thornbush, we were talking about how it's more of like an introductory bourbon. Because I know I've just had bad luck with bourbon. And I've liked a little bit of like the double oak and stuff, but only in mixtures. I can't just drink it on ice. So it's nice to think that, there is a distillery around here that's kind of wanting to also work with I don't want to say like the sissies of the bourbon group, but like the ones of us that are, kind of new to bourbon.
Into it.
Yeah. Because I know some of the smells of bourbon just
Which is what brings me actually to this next, because one of the things that Kristen and I like to talk about a lot on here is stereotypes.
Yeah.
And of course, with bourbon, there is the stereotype. I mean, she just said it. Bourbon is kind of stereotypical towards men instead of women.
Yeah.
And so actually, I mean, this Thornbush that you all have is perfect for the ladies, but not only that, we did when we was looking into keeping it or getting it at the bar to have it over there, I had a couple of our patrons try it, and our bigger bourbon drinkers, they loved the 7-year and the 4-year. The ones that weren't so big on bourbon drinking, like the Thornbush. So I mean, that's kind of
You kind of hit all the
yeah, that was perfect. The perfect
Yeah,
little
Yeah.
mixture there.
yeah, it's more for everybody, not just men.
Yeah.
And that's hard to find, I think, because as many bourbons as I've tasted, it's just hard to find one that's just smooth to drink.
Mhm.
Because I've had somebody tell me that one was smooth, and I would take like a sip of it, and I'm like, I don't know what was smooth about that,
Yeah.
but maybe if I froze it and
So
kind
what's
of
some of
did.
the other stereotypes that you come across being in the bourbon industry? Like, what have you had to deal with?
Yeah, so I would say one of the biggest one is that bourbon is only for men. I mean, you all
Yeah.
nailed it right on the head. My mom won't drink my bourbon. She said if it doesn't taste like Kool-Aid, I won't drink it. So
I learned to get the
yeah,
Thornbush.
well, even the blackberry, she's not a big
You're
fan.
just,
Oh, yeah.
you're just like add a packet of Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Here you go, Mom.
Yeah, but so yeah, that's a pretty big stereotype, and actually a lot of the industry is trying to combat that. So Blue Run's done a really great job of bringing some women on board into kind of some decision-making positions to where they are blenders, they are working to kind of put out the bourbons for the rest of the group. And at the end of the day, women actually have better palates than men. So I think you're going to see a lot more women kind of get into bourbon, like Elizabeth McCall from Woodford Reserve. She's their master distiller now, and she's done a lot to kind of push things forward for women in that.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I would say the other kind of big stereotype is that bourbon's an old man's drink. It's what your
Yeah.
papaw drinks or what your dad drinks.
Yeah.
But I kind of want to try to prove that wrong for my generation, because I mean I have a lot of friends who I graduated college with or graduated high school with that are all into bourbon now, and they're in their mid 20s. Never really thought they would be bourbon drinkers, but now they are. So even with approachable things like Thornbush or a 4-year-old, that kind of gives them a first foray into things without having to go straight to the 125 or 120 proof stuff that a lot of us think of whenever we think of bourbons. That really harsh burn that everybody kind of gets.
Was it hard for you being so young to be taken seriously?
I think so. One of the big things for me was kind of overnight almost. I went from being a fan, waiting in line at distilleries to get bottles, kind of fangirling, so to speak, over specific distilleries and specific releases, to actually being peers with a lot of those people. So I was
And how did you get your foot in the door with that? I mean, did you just go in and say, "Hey guys, I want to show you what I've got, what I can bring to the table here"? Or
really, it was just kind of the going over the hurdle of creating your own brand. So we kind of knew, okay, we've got some barrels, they taste really good, we want to put out a product, and then from there it's just taking chances to get into competitions and apply to those just to see kind of how your spirit fares.
And I love the I guess maybe the history of behind the bond, because it is friends, and I guess you all were just sitting around drinking, and I don't know if you were part of this. I just read it online, but they were sitting around drinking, and they wanted to. There was some that had passed on before and previously, and they were saying, they wanted to make something that went with their bond. So that's where they came up with the name, the Bond Bourbon.
Yeah. So my co-founders, Ben and William, we all met my first week of college. They offered to help me with any accounting or business classes I had, but I was a science major, so I didn't have any of those. So we just became friends instead. And kind of throughout the years, we kind of went through a lot of ups and downs together. We ended up losing 3 friends while we were at UK. And as you said, we were all just sitting around having a drink one night saying, what would we do to have another drink with them, to kind of honor them and relive those times that we shared. So
that's where the name comes from.
Yeah. So that's really an ode to them and that kind of friendship.
And that's amazing. I love that. I absolutely love
it
that.
kind of shows that you're more homegrown, more personable, not just a name.
You've put a very personal touch on this brand, and I think that alone says a lot about the brand, the company. I mean, everything. I think that alone says a lot.
Well, thank you. And I mean, I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, even if they haven't lost friends or had friends that have passed away. There's friendships or relationships that we want to celebrate. So just being a small part of their lives in that little moment buy a drink, means the world to me.
Yeah.
So, I tried to be pretty intentional with it and just tried to make something that didn't seem like a cash grab or seem like it was a marketing scheme. It's just us.
Yeah, which is nice. I think the smaller distilleries they are more personable, whereas when they get bigger,
more family oriented.
Yeah.
It seems like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say oriented, but
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying.
and when it gets bigger, it's more just about the dollar. Which of course, everything's about the dollar, but because you got to make money to stay alive and open. But when you get to the bigger statuses and stuff, it's almost like everything just kind of keeps tasting the same. Everything just kind of remains the same. Every now and then they'll add in something special, but it only lasts for so long.
Let's not forget where they came from too, where they started. I think.
Yeah.
I think that plays a huge part.
Which we have a ton of smaller distilleries kind of popping up around Nelson County. And where are you all located?
So we're in Bards. You're good. So we're in Bardstown, and then we do all our bottling in Frankfurt. So we actually don't have a distillery. So we got our start actually as barrel wholesalers. So distilleries around here will come to us and say, hey, we have excess barrels that we aren't going to put into our products or that clients of ours have, but don't really need anymore. Could you sell these off for us?
Oh, that's interesting.
And so that kind of gave us the pick of the litter, so to speak, on all the best barrels. So we could kind of pick and choose what we wanted and started building our inventory from there. So we're sitting on about 7,000 barrels across 3 different states right now.
Only 7,000.
Yeah, it sounded like it was just something you could shove up under your bed.
Yeah, well, compared to Jim Beam and everybody like that who has hundreds of thousands of barrels, it's drops in the bucket. But yeah,
but you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And at 24, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's very
that
amazing.
is unreal. And
you have it. It's an amazing product. Like I cannot, and it surprises me because again, I'm not a bourbon drinker.
Yeah.
So to find a product of bourbon that I actually like, it's just insane to me.
Yeah. I know. I got to taste it.
It's very good.
I was going to say, I guess I know what we're doing after the podcast.
Yeah.
Kristen's all out of drink for the podcast. That's squirrel bad enough just being sober. So we'd be in big trouble.
That's why I asked if she had an energy drink before.
And it's sitting right beside me.
She was kind of.
Yeah. And it's sitting right here.
So you are a 5th generation Kentuckian.
Yes.
So what does that mean?
Yeah, so I'm the 5th generation in my family to live here in Kentucky.
Okay. So that it's nothing like it's
your family.
Yeah. So just my family. So I live in E-Town now. So I live on the farm that has been in my family for more than 100 years. It was the house my papa grew up in.
That's awesome.
And my family kind of built by hand. So kind of for me, just staying close to my roots. I grew up on a farm. I was big into FFA growing up and actually had a farm in operation with my sister before I kind of went into bourbon. So I've done a little bit of everything. But no matter where I go, I always kind of miss Kentucky or like talking about Kentucky.
Yeah. Well, Kentucky's always home.
Yeah.
Well, and before we got started, I said, you're kind of the nerd of bourbon. I said, I hope you don't take offense to that, but it seems like you know what you're talking about instead of just kind of blubbering off at the mouth. You actually can go into depth about where things come from instead of because I mean you basically have dumbed it down for us because we're not bourbon drinkers and that's really weird living in the bourbon capital, but
hey, nothing's wrong with that.
but it's interesting to listen to because even if I don't drink it, which I am going to try this one, but it's interesting to hear about different things because I love to like gain knowledge on things. It doesn't matter what it is. I just like to suck in the knowledge. So it's kind of interesting listening to you talk about like where you came from, your schooling, how you all came up with the flavors. You used to farm. I would have never guessed that. So I think it's really interesting to listen to where did the flavoring come from instead of just taste it.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I like most about the bourbon industry is that I love being able to learn and love being able to always find new information. That's why I guess I know so much about it is I'm all the time trying to research, trying to learn the history behind things, reading books. And that's for me, one of the things that kind of reminds me it's a job I can spend my entire career in and not know everything.
And how great though is that you get to do something that you absolutely love doing. I mean, that's awesome. Well, and at a young age at that.
I was going to say, and please do not take offense, but at 24 years old, you're not a know-it-all.
Yeah.
You want to gain knowledge. You want to learn more, and like you want to like go around and gain the knowledge, all the knowledge you can. You don't sit here and say like pretend like you know everything about all. I think that'll be so like interesting, I guess, to watch grow. Because now that we know about your brand, we'll definitely like support it and things. But I think it's very interesting because it shows that you're always going to grow. You're always going to add on to what you have instead of kind of just staying in the same taste and the same just kind of area.
Yeah, and that's there's always going to be people that are smarter than me and know a lot more of the chemistry or a lot more of the science behind everything. But for me, it's just kind of taking it step by step, and like you said, kind of learning and growing along the way. A lot of the larger brands you mentioned earlier kind of keep the same flavor profiles. For them, that's kind of a conscious choice. So they want you.
It's what works for them.
Yeah. So if you pick up a bottle in California, they want it to taste the same as the bottle you picked up in Kentucky. Whereas for me right now on the scale I like being able to kind of showcase different flavors. So as I talked about, I have 4-barrel blends that I kind of pick out one barrel that has each flavor. So for like our 7-year-old, one that tastes like sweet oak, one that tastes like chocolate, one that tastes like apples or oranges, and then one that's kind of like a leather taste. And so that's kind of what I look for in each of those barrels. And so it gives me a little bit of room to play around with.
I was very saying, if you stick to the fruit, I think because if she's bragging on it, even sitting here, like I like the orange, like citrus, I think that would be very interesting to watch you try and to honestly taste when you do come up with it. Because I have a feeling you will. But I think citrus would be a nice like an off kick to the bourbon taste.
Yeah.
And there's really not any citrus bourbon that I have found. Because I am more of a like the mangoes and things, but I do like orange flavoring.
Yeah.
So I think that would be interesting.
So we did. This was kind of a failed R&D. We did a mango tahini bourbon while we were looking into doing the blackberry. So a little bit of kind of like
that would be fun to me.
A mango spicy kick a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I like being able to kind of explore with those flavors and have the freedom to kind of do that. Like I said, I was really big into science growing up. So just kind of being a science nerd and having the freedom to experiment and see what works and see what doesn't.
Now, is bourbon the only thing that you mix blend? Is that the only thing that you're in, or is it a wide variety of spirits that you do? Or
yeah, so right now it's just whiskeys. So I can do bourbons, rye whiskeys, anything like that. But I've also taken a little bit of time to kind of learn more about rum and kind of foray into that kind of.
And rum is kind of a girly thing.
So we have a question.
Yeah.
It says, I'm not a drinker, but what does the leather taste? What is that? When you describe leather taste, what is that?
Yeah. So for me, I call it kind of a funkiness. So
like it smells? Like leather smells?
Yeah, kind of like how leather smells. I mean, that's the best way to describe it is it's not appetizing or appealing to everybody.
I don't think I would.
It's a unique, it's one of the unique kind of, it's to your taste.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. That's what anytime that's why you smell something for me before you taste it, because the smell normally goes with the taste. Yeah. And then that's how you pick up the flavoring. So that's why I was wondering the smells. You smell leather and then that's what you're going to taste.
Yeah. And that's a lot of taste anyway, is just smell. Actually, I think it's like 40 or 50% of what you're tasting is what you're smelling. And there's one bourbon that I really like that I jokingly called to my friends the blue cheese of bourbon. Kind of that leather note is like
nobody likes
for everybody.
It,
You either like it and love it or you don't. And so some people kind of describe it as funky, a little bit earthy. Just to me, it kind of rounds it out a little bit and makes it taste a little older.
Tommy House, where can you pick up bottles? Where can you get your bottles?
Yeah, so we're distributed in 130 stores here in Kentucky. Right now, I know we have it in stock at Toddy's in Bardstown. We have it at the Blind Pig there in Bardstown and a bunch of the other liquor stores, or you can come down to Long Branch.
Yes, Tommy,
get pours of it there.
To Long Branch and come drink it with us. We're actually going to have a tasting with them this Thursday at 7 p.m.
And do you all have any stores like towards LaRue or Hardin County? Because a lot of people that we know are in LaRue and Hardin as well.
Yeah, so John O's in E-Town. They've been a big supporter of us since day one. So you can stop in at any of his stores and pick it up there.
Okay. How long have you all been making?
Yeah. So our regular bourbons or straight bourbons have been out since April. And then Thornbush has been out since
So
July.
you all are extremely new.
Yeah, very new.
April, what's the date?
April 8th, I believe.
That's my birthday.
Really?
I was like, I wonder if it's going to be my birthday. I don't know why I felt like it was going to. I was like, I bet that's my birthday. Now I'll never forget.
Yeah. That's a whole side.
Now I'll never forget.
We're a whole side.
Yeah, now on my birthday, we're just going to have to go buy some bourbon from you.
I was going to say, I know what to get you for your birthday.
Exactly. I know we were talking about it. I was doing some research, and I don't know how true it is because we all know how Google is. But there is not very many master blenders.
Yeah, it's kind of a thing that is new to bourbon. For bourbon, a lot of the kind of people you see are the master distillers. Whereas in Scotland and Europe, in the Scotch industry in general, master blenders are more of a thing, because they could source from 20 different distilleries, buy barrels from 20 different places, and then it's their job to make it all taste the same. So if you've ever seen like Johnny Walker Black, they use 60 different types of Scotch to make that kind of final blend. So it's a lot of just being able to manage what you have on hand. So another big part of my job is kind of warehouse management. So I can actually move the barrels around in the warehouse and change the flavor based on where they're at. So if something's too oaky to me, I can put it down by the floor, kind of by the concrete. Cooler. Yeah, and it's a little cooler. Doesn't get as much of that flavor.
See, that's crazy that's how that operates, and that you have the mentality to go in and say, let's move this from here to here and change the whole flavor, the whole dynamics of it.
Yeah, and that's like I kind of try to think 3 or 4 batches in advance. So that way, if I have barrels that like I know are kind of headed in the direction of, that kind of citrus or apple that I'm looking for in the 7-year, but aren't quite there, I can move it to a certain section to kind of try to bring that out a little bit. And that's the other kind of part of it I love, is that it's such an organic process, is that distilling can give you about 20% of the flavor. 80% of that is just aging and maturation. And that's something that we'll never be able to control. So I'm kind of working with the elements, working with uncertainties there. So that's pretty cool to me.
Oh, sorry. So kind of you have to trust the process.
Yeah.
You never know what you're going to get. You just pray it's going to be exactly what you're wanting.
Yeah.
And then with you being a master blender, what exactly? So you said you all don't have a distillery, so you don't make your own.
Yeah.
But you make your own.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
Yeah. So it's basically, we kind of start off with buying barrels. So we have, like I said, barrels from 3 states right now. So some in Indiana, some in North Carolina, some here in Kentucky. And then a lot of what my job is tasting through those, finding what flavors I do like, and kind of pulling those barrels off to the side, and then figuring out kind of what ratios I want to use those barrels in. So I talked a little bit about experimenting earlier and kind of seeing what I like. I can use, if you think of baking, you can use like half a cup of this or a cup of this, or 2 cups of this. And so kind of the same for bourbon, just trying different volumes of that, seeing, okay, if I bring this down to 100 proof, does it taste a little bit better? Or if I leave it at cask strength, does that kind of make the final blend even better?
So how do you change the proof?
Yeah, so really it's just adding water to it.
Okay. Yeah. I've always wondered
Really?
that, because I'm like, I know there's like 80 proof, 100 proof, 120 proof. I've always seen the proofs, and I'm like, how do you change the proof
See,
to the
you know
bourbon?
way more about it than I would. I would not.
I told you. Who goes to school to be a bartender?
I would not have even thought of that.
I did. But that's what, when I think about bourbon, because to me, the higher up you go in the proof, the like more of that like just bitter taste. I don't know how to describe the bourbon taste, because
you're good.
It's just bitter to me. But I think that's what's neat about bringing the flavoring in, because you change that. Especially for somebody like me that's kind of like a sissy when it comes to bourbon, because there's really no other way to describe it. I'm new to bourbon as far as drinking it, but the proof. So if you wanted to up the proof of the Thornbush or any of your other whiskeys, that's all you would have to do.
Yeah, I just add a little bit less water to it. And so for me, that's kind of the...
Sorry, guys.
You're good.
I'm started drinking.
I don't know if y'all heard it, but we definitely heard it. There was ringing in our ears.
Yeah, it's pretty loud.
Yeah, but yeah, so it's just how much water you add to it. And talking about proofs, the other kind of weird thing with it is that by law, bourbon has to be put in the barrel at no more than 125 proof. But if you put it at like the top of a warehouse and leave it for 4 or 5 years, and it can actually raise in proof on its own. And so it can get to more than 140 proof. And so they call that hazmat.
So is it
wow.
when you do that, because I know it's with the heat,
Yeah.
is that it's basically like the mesh or whatever they use to make the whiskey? Is it just kind of like it cooks it to make it like more potent?
Yeah. So if you think about like putting a pot of boiling water on the stove, bourbon is really just a mixture of alcohol and then water. And that's what's sitting in the barrel. And so it gets all that heat from the sun, and then the water actually burns off quicker than what the alcohol does, and leaves it kind of concentrated and with like a lesser volume. That's what
I was wondering. And that's why I mentioned when you said something about the oaky flavor, like when you put it closer to the ground, it's cooler. So it's not, that barrel's not heating up to where it's soaking into the barrel or soaking out of, wait, you know what I meant? To get the oaky flavor. You know what I meant? I just can't get it out of my mouth.
Bourbon's not bourboning, right?
Exactly. But I do think that's interesting because a lot of people, they don't know that the bourbon gets moved for the flavoring, which I had never heard it's like just said how you said it, but I did know that that's what they would do as far as because when I worked at Jim Beam for a little while, I would talk to people that did all that, and I thought that was so interesting because it's interesting to watch the process. Which the flavoring clearly is there for your alls, but I love your alls labels. Like I didn't know you were who we were interviewing, and I seen the bottles at the Long Branch, and I was like, these bottles are mine when they're empty. These bottles are mine. Like I want them because they're just so unique. Because you've got like the
We
Evan Williams.
I brought one of the bottles so that we could show you all what this is. The Bond 4-year. And I don't know. I don't guess, Danny, there's a way we can bring this in, can we? I can just bring it up closer.
Yeah.
So, see?
Yeah, we kind of made a conscious decision on that. We just wanted to make something that stood out from the rest of the pack.
But I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And I love it. I mean, she's right. It's a great, the bottling on it, even on the Thornbush. I wish I would brought the Thornbush over. And I think it was the Thornbush now. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's wheated. The wheated.
Yeah, so Thornbush, I use wheated bourbon to make. So it's at least 2 years old every time we make it. We're one of the only flavored bourbons on the market, if not the only flavored one. Just because people think that bourbon's too good to be flavored or too good to be used in that way.
And is that something that you've ran into, making this blackberry? Because, I mean, there are some bourbon snobs out there that are like, no, you're not.
Yeah,
turn around with our bourbon.
Yeah, surprisingly. And so we ended up going to there's a YouTuber called Bruzel. He does bourbon reviews and like barrel picks and hunts and that type of thing. And we went down to his festival and kind of did his VIP section and did tastings of all our products. And within the first 10 minutes of the event, we probably had 40, 50 people in line just for the blackberry bourbon because they liked that. And then towards the end, it was all these master distillers from other companies coming over and trying it and saying, like, wow, this is really good. Like, I don't know how you were able to keep the bourbon flavor on the back end, but also kind of add that blackberry in there without it being overpowering.
That's awesome. That's really awesome.
Yeah.
Now, you also set up at the Bourbon Festival, too. So how did that go over?
Yeah, so we ended up setting up at Bourbon on the Banks, which is in Frankfurt, and it went really well. So Thornbush actually sold out in the first 45 minutes that we were up there.
Wow.
But it was a great reception from all three products. All day long, we were making Thornbush and lemonade. We had to make probably 10 or 15 gallons of it just to kind of keep everybody satisfied. It was like 85 degrees and everybody else.
And that's what I love about it, because it is such when you mix it with the lemonade, it is such a refreshing. It's so, that's the only thing I can describe it as. It's a refreshing drink.
Yeah, because bourbon itself, to me, it kind of is dry. It's not dry, but it dries your mouth out. So that is kind of unique as far as the bourbons go, because to me, if you're actually thirsty, do not drink bourbon. because it's not going to
And
quench your thirst.
I was very shocked at it when I tried it because, again, I'm not a bourbon drinker,
Mhm.
but when I tried that, I was like, oh wait, this is nice. I like this.
Yeah. I've heard it called refreshing. I've also heard it called dangerous.
Mhm.
I was
Mhm.
just tired of seeing my friends drinking Fireball.
Yeah,
We have
Yeah.
a few Fireball drinkers.
Yeah,
A few.
the stuff. The
And
stuff
don't
that'll
ever
get
be
hangovers,
sitting up
yeah.
at the bar when they decide they're going to buy shots for everybody because it's going to be
Ooh.
Fireball.
That's
Yeah.
normally what they get.
And it's rough. It gets very rough.
So,
by the end of the night.
and I want to read the notes here on the Thornbush, which is the blackberry bourbon whiskey.
Mhm.
So it says the nose is the fresh blackberries, honey, and sour candy. So what does that mean when it
Your
says nose?
smell.
Your smell?
Yeah. So that's really kind of what you smell. The big thing for me that I got the first time around was, if you know those kind of like blackberry candies that are gummy on the inside and then crunchy on the outside.
I know what you're talking about.
Yep. So that's what it smells like to me. It kind of smells like that gummy candy.
That's like an odor candy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I
But
thought so.
yeah, but also kind of like a blackberry jam type of smell too.
Okay.
He's so young, but he seems to have like an old soul about
Yeah.
him.
You definitely have an
Yeah.
old soul.
And I mean, that's a good thing. It's
Yeah.
not a bad thing. So the taste is blackberry jam, black pepper, and currant.
Yeah, so just kind of what I would call dark fruits. So like the currant is just really kind of like adds to a little bit of the complexity of the flavor.
Mhm.
So it's not just saying like, oh, yep, this is blackberry.
So what exactly is the currant?
Yeah, so a currant is a type of berry. So it's
Okay.
Just a darker fruit that's in the same realm as kind of like a raspberry or a blackberry. Whenever I say like darker flavors, they're not as like bright, so a little more subdued. They're a little more complex.
They're not as much in your face. They're
Yeah.
kind of
underlying.
yeah.
And then the finish is toasted oak, sweet cream, and melon.
Yeah. So kind of that refreshing, you're going back to that kind of melon flavor, leaves you a little bit refreshed.
And come to think of it, I guess maybe look at me, I'm learning bourbon stuff. That's what I tasted was the melon in it, maybe.
Yeah. It's kind of refreshing. It's kind of like if you eat a piece of cantaloupe, you kind of feel refreshed afterwards. It's kind of like a light, almost watery type taste. A little bit of that black pepper from the bourbon. And then that oak from the bourbon as well. So it kind of lets you know that it's there, lets you know that there is still bourbon in it, but it's 75 proof. So it's super light, super approachable. And kind of the idea for me was turning bourbon into a summertime drink, because I know a lot of people that they don't pick up bourbon until it's fall or wintertime and then put it back down in about May after Bourbon Day. So this is something, like you said, you can put in lemonade, you can drink all summer long and really don't have to think twice about it.
That would get me in so much trouble.
Yeah, well, as you said, it's
especially like putting it in lemonade. Because when you say putting in lemonade, the lemonade you get, the fresh lemonade at like a fair or anywhere you walk.
Yeah.
I think of adding it to that, and I'm like, oh man.
So that's kind of how we're gonna mix it when we do the tasting Thursday.
I'll be there.
Yeah.
I'm
With
usually
fresh
always
blackberries. We're gonna put fresh blackberries in it too to kind of dress it up, make it pretty.
That'll be nice.
Yeah.
So y'all definitely have to come to Long Branch on Thursday, and
7 p.m. Yes, we're doing the tasting with, and we will also have the other. I'm totally putting these on the back burner, and I don't mean to. I'm just so excited about the Thornbush. The Bond, we have the Bond Eternal, and then the Bond Straight Bourbon Whiskey. So the regular Bond is 4 years, and the Bond Eternal is 7 years.
Yes.
Okay. So then the Bond is 75% corn, 21% rye, 4% malted barley. The nose is orange, butterscotch, and cream. And the taste is vanilla, praline, pecan, and toasted grain. See that? I mean, that
sounds so unique.
I know.
Compared to others.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to make something that was more of a traditional bourbon. So if you drink like a Buffalo Trace, you're going to get a lot of vanilla, a lot of caramel, a little bit of kind of that nuttiness out of it. And so that's kind of what I tried to go for. And a lot of people think, well, it's a 4-year-old bourbon, it's not going to be that good. I kind of tried to use that to our advantage and kind of make the most out of the barrels that we did have. So there were some that were fairly young tasting. So when they're young tasting, they taste almost kind of corny. A lot of that mash bill is coming through. So I try to use that to our advantage and kind of bring out the natural sweetness that corn kind of has.
I'm glad you explained that, because I was like, tasted young.
Yeah.
got confused for a second.
Yeah, I
was
know
like,
it's a lot of like very specific terminology,
but it's nice to hear because it's hard to understand where this all comes from.
yeah,
And
And
there's
there's
just
so much work.
Yeah, there's so much that goes
put
into it that people, a lot of people just think you throw it in a barrel and out it comes.
yeah, just set it and forget it, right?
Yeah. So it's neat, I think, to hear about how it grows, how the process has to evolve, especially with you trying so many different things. Because I think that is so awesome because it's hard to find bourbon, even though they taste different. Some are a little bit smoother than others. They're still kind of the same taste. They do have their notes and you can kind of taste them, but to me, they're still bitter. So it's nice for somebody to come in and say, let's try something new.
Yeah.
Especially around here, because there is so many bourbon places. And it just, to me, I have not found one that just suckered me in.
Yeah.
So the Bond Eternal, it has a whole other flavoring, looks like, from even the regular Bond. And it's the 7 years. So it is 60% corn, 36% rye, 4% malted barley. The nose is sweet oak, vanilla, and earthiness. And then the taste is rich. Say that word.
Oh, you were on a roll.
I know. I was.
Cacao.
Cacao.
Like cocoa.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, I was like, I
yeah.
think it's cacao, but I'm gonna.
Orchard fruit and leather. So this is the one that you said has got the leather.
Yeah, so kind of like that earthiness that the leather brings to it, you can kind of smell almost, just because it's sat in a barrel for 7 years. You know, it's had all that oxygen and all that wood kind of around it. It, isn't going to smell super, super fresh. And so that's kind of the good thing about bourbon is the longer it sits, kind of the more mellow it can be. So really the big difference between our 4-year-old and 7-year-old is our 4-year-old has a lower amount of rye in the recipe. So it's not going to be as spicy as what our 7-year will be. So the 7-year has 36% rye. And I say spicy, kind of like baking spices that you have in your cabinet. So like cinnamon, and coriander,
the peppery,
peppery kind of.
spicy, which is neat. The earthiness when you say that. So I think dirt.
Yeah.
Is there another way to think about that? Like, is it?
Or is
that
it?
What it is?
It's not really like
barrel, so.
Yeah, it's not really like a dirt type taste. It's more of just kind of like more of like a mellow wood type taste.
Okay.
So more of kind of like a subdued wood. So like one of my favorite bourbons is Russell's Reserve. So like Wild Turkey, and they have a really nice kind of sweet oak note. So it's oak that almost feels like it's been covered in like caramel or crystallized kind of candy.
See, that makes sense.
And it just kind of gives you this mellow note afterwards.
I'm glad I asked because I know if I thought dirt, everybody else was probably going to think dirt. Because when you think earth, you think dirt. Grass and dirt.
Yeah.
So that is, it's just so unique, I think, especially the notes on here because if you look at Jim Beam's, I cannot think of them off the top of my head, but they're completely different. And it's neat that you have kind of taken what you learned in school and through all that process and you went the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So
you made it your own.
Yeah, you made it your own instead of kind of following footsteps and you grew. So I think at 24,
that's amazing.
In 5 years, you are going to be so far along because like I said, you're not a know-it-all. You want to gain the knowledge. And you take what you've learned.
Clearly you have a good palate for it. I mean, clearly you have a good palate for it because, I mean, this is amazing stuff coming from somebody, the new zero about the bourbon and the bourbon industry. And thank you for teaching us that.
Absolutely.
But, I mean, it goes to show that you have a really good palate for it.
I knew a little, but not very much.
Way more than I did.
Hey, that's all you need is just a little bit.
So listen, I'm originally from Harlan County. When I was growing up, it was dry. So, you move from a dry county to the bourbon capital of the world, and that's a culture shock.
Yeah. That's one of my best friends from college is from Harlan County.
Oh, really?
Yep. In Lexington now. So yeah.
Well, and you said here, and like you said, you all don't have a distillery. You buy your barrels from other distilleries and stuff that they're extras or whatever. That's kind of interesting because I don't believe y'all are the only one around that do that.
That's a common thing to do, correct?
Yeah. So it's getting more and more popular. just because it costs so much money to start a distillery.
Mhm.
You know, stills are very, very expensive. And then you have the power bill and the water bill on top of that. And everybody in the distilling industry says, just wait for that first month when you get that water and power bill,
Mhm.
and you got to go take out a loan to pay for it.
Right, because then you still have to wait.
Yeah.
You still have to wait for
For your
the
product to sell.
Yeah, you know, you're thinking, well, I made a great bourbon, but then have to wait 4 years to figure out if it's good or
if
not.
it's good.
Yeah.
And
But that is interesting that you do that. And it kind of, it's kind of a, I guess like
Smart. I would say it's smart.
it's extremely smart, but it's kind of like an ode to the people you're buying the barrels from.
yeah,
Because you're like, I bought my barrels from you all because
mhm,
they were what I wanted.
yeah,
And then you don't have to worry about making it in 4 years being like, oh, that wasn't exactly what I wanted. Then you have to sell your barrels.
yeah, and that's a really good thing too. Is you know, like our 4 and 7 year old bourbon, that's actually Indiana bourbon. So it's from a distillery called. I know. We're not Hoosier
Podcast
fans
over.
around here. Yeah, we're not playing Indiana this weekend, so maybe we can get past that. But yeah, so it's from Indiana, and honestly, some of the most consistent bourbon I've had. So, you know, barrel after barrel that I've tasted from them, it's always tasted really, really good. And I even tried a bunch of Kentucky barrels to kind of see, okay, is this something that we can kind of
The comparison.
get with the same thing? And it just wasn't. And
Yeah.
so they actually were owned by Seagram's, so the ginger ale company. They owned a Lawrenceburg, Indiana plant, and then a Lawrenceburg, Kentucky plant. And so the Lawrenceburg, Kentucky plant is now Four Roses. So their recipe is just 1%
I heard
off.
by Four Roses.
Yeah.
Wow.
Do you all have a storefront or anything with your like your?
Mhm.
It's not a distillery, but what a
Products.
warehouse product?
Yeah, so we just call it a brand portfolio. We don't have anything for now. We're wanting to eventually get something set up so that we can have like a home for all of our brands where people can come into Bardstown and taste through all our products and get to know us a little bit more.
Yeah, because I think that would be really interesting, and I think that might have been something else Tommy House was kind of hinting at. Like, do you all have an actual storefront? Because you all were talking candles and things like that, and I think that's interesting because that is also that's a female thing. Like, men are not big on candles. My husband's ready to kill me. I have 2 big blue totes full of candles. I'm obsessed with candles, so it's an issue. But I think that would be interesting as you all grow and things to have like your all's merchandise and the candles and just things like that people can actually see because Bardstown is popping.
It looks like we
I don't know
may
why.
have another question.
I can't see that far.
Well, I thought it was popping up. So, and I'm not even going to try to say your name. You get Yansky Frank Holland.
Oh, Yaneski.
Yaneski? Okay. Okay. I'm curious for bourbon if it smells and makes, I'm curious for bourbon, but it smells and makes me nauseous. Okay. So is there a way, I mean, can you recommend anything that maybe the smell, or is it just bourbon's just not for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, you can try it and see. You know, some people just makes them nauseous. It kind of brings them back to a bad night that they had, and they never want to touch it again.
Right.
A great way.
Sheila does that for me.
Yeah. And honestly, kind of a great way just to kind of try that and see is just in cocktails. So that's kind of why we made Thornbush. So we knew bourbon isn't for everybody, but some people want to try it, or maybe they're.
And I highly do suggest trying the Thornbush. If the regular bourbon makes you sick, definitely try the Thornbush.
Yaneski, after I try it, I will definitely message you and let you know the flavoring and stuff and if it's good. Because I'm sure it is if she likes it. And Miss Yaneski is not from around here, so that's why.
Oh, that's why I couldn't say.
Yeah, that's why you're having trouble with that.
Yeah, and really, the blackberry kind of covers up a lot of the bourbon smell. So, if that's something that you're not interested in, then yeah, that's definitely the one to try.
Yeah, because it doesn't, and he's right, it doesn't really smell, it doesn't have that bourbon strong note to it either. So
yeah, but either that or just in cocktails. That's going to be the easiest.
The lemonade.
Way.
Yeah. And he was saying that they do not have a storefront yet, but again, go ahead and tell them where they can buy the bottles at.
Yeah.
One more time.
So they're at the Blind Pig in Bardstown, Toddy's in Bardstown, John O's in Elizabethtown, or you can go to thebondbourbon.com or thornbushwhiskey.com, and we can ship it right to your door.
Or you can come right here in New Haven and go to Long Branch Saloon, and we will fix you up some because we now have all 3, the 4-year, the 7-year, and the Thornbush.
And
So
the
we're excited
labels
about
will
that.
definitely catch your eye.
Yes.
And
And we are having the tasting. They will be here at Long Branch 7 p.m. on Thursday evening. And we have all products that they're going to be set up to, if you all are interested, come out and talk to them. Will you be here on Thursday with them?
Not
or?
sure yet. I'll have to
Okay.
check my schedule and
All
stuff.
right.
But yeah.
Well,
He's like, I'm
maybe,
busy,
maybe not.
man.
You'll get to meet Logan. That'll be something cool. I mean, that's the youngest master blender here in the world. It was the world, right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. So we thank you all. We thank you, Logan, for coming out and talking with us. We're so excited about this products, and we thank you all for listening. If you all have any questions or anything, I think we have their webpage and their information that we can pull up.
Yeah, we'll make sure that we share those. And like even us sitting here, saying how much we aren't bourbon drinkers, keep that in mind, that bourbon just isn't for everybody. And we are very new to tasting bourbon.
We are very, very new to it.
even at our age, we kind of stuck to what we knew. But I think it's very interesting to try different things.
Which is why I was so excited about the thorn bush. That was what I probably said that a 1,000 times already.
You're good. And I was going to say, as we've said a couple times, bourbon isn't for everybody. Rum may be your thing. Vodka may be your thing. Bourbon isn't the end all be all.
But thorn bush may be the one that kind of pops everybody's cherry if they've had a problem with the smell or the taste or the bourbon taste. So I mean, I think that'll be very interesting.
I do too. Again, thank you, Logan, for coming out. We appreciate you being on the show with us. And as always, you all can follow us on Facebook, Long Branch Talks. You can follow us we're on Instagram and YouTube, Long Branch Talks. And we have a TikTok, Amber and Kristen. Make sure you follow and like all of our social medias. And thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you all.